What if I told you that one of Australia's most iconic cars wasn't born in a shed or in a boardroom, but in the halls of Parliament? This is the story of how post-war politics, national ambition, and a global industry came together to create Holden, the first truly Australian-made car. It's the late 1940s. Australia is scarred by World War II. Soldiers are returning home. Factories that once built weapons now sit idle. The nation needs work, identity, and direction. Enter Prime Minister Ben Chifley, a former train driver turned Labor leader. Chifley believed in full employment, local production, and building a self-sufficient Australia. Backed by his government and fueled by a partnership with General Motors, a bold new plan was set in motion. Build a car affordable, reliable, and built for Australian conditions. The result, the Holden 48215, launched in 1948. It wasn't just a car. It was a turning point in Australian industry. But behind the chrome and curves was a much bigger story, one of political will, economic transformation, and national pride. Let's take a drive back to 1945 and see how a government helped build an automotive icon. The year is 1945. World War II has just ended, and Australia, like much of the world, is rebuilding, but the scars of the war run deep. During the conflict, Australia had ramped up local manufacturing to support the war effort. Munitions, military vehicles, and aircraft parts all were being produced domestically in a way that had never been done before. Now that the war was over, those same manufacturers and workers risked being left idle. Unemployment loomed, infrastructure was aging, and Australia remained heavily reliant on imported goods, especially cars. The automobile market in the 1940s was dominated by expensive American and British imports. They were designed for smooth highways and city driving, completely unsuited for Australia's rough roads and harsh terrain. Prime Minister Ben Chifley, leader of the Australian post-war Labor government, saw this as an opportunity. A former train driver, Chifley was a strong believer in national development and economic sovereignty. He envisioned a self-reliant Australia, an Australia that could stand on its own 2 feet, build its own products, and employ its own people. His government launched an ambitious post-war reconstruction plan, expanding social services, boosting public infrastructure, and crucially, investing in a domestic industry. One key idea, a fully Australian-made car, built for our roads, our people, and our future. Chifley knew that manufacturing wasn't just about economics, it was about national identity, and the car he dreamed of would become a symbol of that very independence. The end of World War II marked a turning point for Australia. The fighting had stopped, but the battle to rebuild the nation was just beginning. During the war, the Australian economy had been completely reshaped. Civilian industries were converted for military production. Factories were churning out rifles, munitions, aircraft parts, and military vehicles. Women entered the workforce in record numbers. Australia had, for the first time, proven that it could build complex machinery at scale. But in 1945, with peace returning, a major question loomed. What now? Thousands of soldiers were returning home. Many factories, having served their wartime purpose, risked being shut down, and unemployment threatened to spike. The post-war Labor government, led by Prime Minister Ben Chifley, saw this moment as a historic opportunity. Chifley, a former railwayman from Bathurst, was deeply committed to building a more independent, self-sufficient nation. His government believed in full employment, nation building, and using the state to drive long-term economic progress. Chifley didn't want to patch the country up, he wanted to transform it. At the heart of the transformation was a bold plan for industrial development. Australia would no longer rely solely on imported goods, especially when it came to something as important and symbolic as the car. At the time, nearly all cars on Australian roads were imported from Britain or the United States. They were expensive, hard to maintain, and poorly suited for Australian rugged conditions. Spare parts were costly. Rural drivers often had to wait weeks for repairs. A local car industry backed by government policy would create jobs, reduce reliance on imports, and give Australians a product built for their unique environment. Chifley didn't just want to build a car, he wanted to build an industry, one that could stand on its own 2 feet and help shape Australia's economic independence for decades to come. Before Holden was making cars, They were making something completely different. The company began in Adelaide in the mid-1800s, crafting leather goods for horses and riders. Over time, as Australia changed and technology advanced, so did Holden. By the early 1900s, they were building car bodies, attaching them to imported American chassis from companies like Chevrolet and Buick. In 1931, the American car giant General Motors saw the value in what Holden had built. They bought the business and formed a new company, General Motors Holdens, or GMH. From there, Holden operated as a local branch of the GM empire, assembling vehicles in Australia using overseas designs. But everything changed after World War II. With the country focused on rebuilding and creating jobs, GMH proposed something radical, designing and building a car right here in Australia from the ground up. The government was immediately interested. Prime Minister Ben Chifley and his Labor government understood this wasn't just a business deal, it was the turning point. A local car industry could boost employment, develop skills, and give Australians something they could call their own. The government offered support through tariffs on imports, tax incentives, and behind-the-scenes coordination to make the project possible. While no direct funding was handed over, government backing made the economics work. In 1946, the plan was greenlit. The first Australian-designed, mass-produced car would be built in Holden's factory in Woodville, South Australia. It would be durable, affordable, and tailored for Australian roads and conditions. This was more than just a manufacturing project. It was a statement of national capability, and it was about to become one of the most iconic chapters in Australian automotive history. On the 29th of November 1948, history was made. At the Fisherman's Bend factory in Melbourne, Prime Minister Ben Chifley stepped forward and unveiled a sleek, modest, four-door sedan. With a proud smile, he declared, "She's a beauty." That car was the Holden 48215, later known simply as the FX Holden, and it was the first mass-produced car ever designed and built in Australia. Priced at £733, about 2 years' wages for an average worker, it wasn't exactly cheap, but it was affordable for middle-class families. And that was the point. This was a car made for Australians. Built to handle harsh outback roads, extreme weather conditions, and long distances, the FX was tough, simple, and reliable. It featured a 2.15-litre straight-six engine, lightweight construction, and rugged suspension. And unlike the big American imports, it was compact and efficient, perfect for Australian conditions. But the FX Holden wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol. It represented Australia's growing independence, economically, industrially, and culturally. It marked the success of Chifley's post-war vision, a government working with industry to build a modern, self-reliant nation. Australians embraced the FX. It became a source of pride, a symbol of progress, and for many, a sign that Australia could now stand on its own 2 feet. By the early 1950s, Holden was producing thousands of vehicles each year, dominating the roads and quickly becoming a household name. The FX wasn't just the first, it was the foundation of something bigger. Holden had arrived, and for many Australians, it felt like the country itself had taken the wheel. The Holden 48215 wasn't just a commercial success. It was a turning point in Australia's identity. For the first time, Australians weren't just assembling foreign cars. They were designing, building, and driving a vehicle made for them, by them. Within a few years of its launch, Holden had become a dominant force in the local market. By 1953, 1 in 3 cars on Australian roads bore the Holden badge. Families lined up to put their name on a waiting list. Owning a Holden was a symbol of success, stability, and belonging. The FX gave Australians confidence that they could build world-class products and reinforced the idea that national progress wasn't just about policy, but about pride. Politically, it marked one of the most successful examples of government-led industrial policy in Australian history. Chifley's vision of full employment and domestic manufacturing had found a physical form, and it was parked in people's driveways. The Holden wasn't just an economic tool, it was a unifying symbol during a time of rapid social change. It helped bridge the gap between working class pride and middle class aspiration. In the decades that followed, Holden would become deeply embedded in the Australian culture, part of the national psyche. It wasn't just a car brand, it was a way of life. And it all began with one model, one government vision, and one moment of post-war optimism. The FX Holden didn't just change the way Australians drove, it helped shape the way they saw themselves. The FX Holden was more than just Australia's first locally built car. It was the product of vision, timing, and belief. It proved that a country still emerging from the shadow of war could build more than just machinery. It could build confidence, pride, and identity. Behind the steel panels and chrome trim was a deeper story of government willing to shape the future, of a company bold enough to take a chance, and of a people ready to embrace something their own. For decades, Holden would become part of everyday life, woven into weekends, job sites, road trips, and memories. It was trusted, familiar, and proudly ours. But the road wasn't always smooth. As the decades rolled on, Australia's car industry would face new pressures: global competition, changing trade policy, economic shifts, and slow erosion of local manufacturing. And ultimately, how we went from "She's a Beauty" in 1948 to Holden's last breath in 2020. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the arrival of Ford reshaped the landscape and how Australia's most iconic automotive rivalry was born. The story of Holden was just the beginning. What came next would define a generation. Hey guys, if you made it this far into the video, I just wanted to say thanks for watching. This is my first video and my first time editing, so it's not the best, but if you want to see more, like and subscribe. Thanks.